Well, what do we make of that? We can speak now to a cybersecurity expert, Hank Thomas, who's in our studio in Washington. Hank, thanks very much for joining us. One thing that strikes me, whether this is the Russians or not, how could it happen? I mean, surely the levels of security awareness would be greater than they appear to have been.
Yes, I think a lot of us are asking that question maybe outside of the cybersecurity community, but folks in the cybersecurity community, I think we kind of sort of felt like we saw this coming. What needs to happen is what we consider critical infrastructure needs to expand beyond bridges and the departments of defense and in the intelligence community and maybe critical infrastructure in our cities to things like elections that are sort of outside the norm of what we would consider critical infrastructure, and put the same level of emphasis on those things.
Right, and in terms of the Russians, their level of sophistication, are they any more advanced than other major nations around the world?
Absolutely. The Russians might have lost some kinetic capability since the Cold War. I would say their non-kinetic, their cyber capability is more advanced than ever, and that they are the A-team. They come in stealthy, and they have more equivalent of special forces in the cyber realm than anyone else.
Right,
other than maybe Western forces.
Yeah, so given all the, never mind all the, the poo-pooing of what's happening and this clearly is errant nonsense, this would presumably give them a great sense of confidence and maybe even further ambition as to what they can do.
Absolutely. They'll continue to admit nothing, deny everything, and make counter-accusations. It's a sort of a standard tradecraft within the intelligence community. Especially since they've gotten away with such a big success in this particular instance.
Well, Mr. Trump comes into the White House fairly soon. Of course, that might, I suppose, for a while, change attitudes a little bit. But do you think these are the sorts of tactics that might be transferred also to many other Western nations? I mean, I'm thinking perhaps we've got elections coming up in France, then we've got German elections next year. I mean, really massive key political moments. Is it more than just a US target, do you think?
Absolutely. I've been aware of indicators of compromise through my work with corporations and with government for years and years and years. I encourage you to check out a report on Operation Pawn Storm. There's evidence of this going back with the Russians to 2004, and they've targeted NATO networks, our allies in Western Europe, and I would give it a high degree of probability that there's already colonization of many of those networks, and we won't be able to trust them when we need them most in times like elections or war.
Right. Well, you alluded at the very top of this to the sorts of lack of security measures should be greater. What can be done then? How can this be averted, avoided, stopped? Right.
So we have too high of a reliance on our perimeter defenses, the virtual moats and the walls around our networks. They can't be contained like that. Our critical infrastructure is no longer just within the government, it's outside of government. There has to be increased public-private partnerships. There's already some, but corporations are going to have to now invite, and even quasi-governmental organizations are going to have to invite government experts in to help them solve this problem. They can't do this alone, and neither can government. We're going to have to hunt for the adversary on our networks, and we're going to have to root them out, and we're going to continuously have to do that because of the nature of the persistency of the threat.
It's never going to stop now, is it? Hank Thomas, thanks very much indeed.
Thanks for having me.